Tonight, the Persian Gulf is once again becoming the center of global attention. Reports of increased American naval movement toward the region have triggered immediate reactions from Tehran, raising fresh concerns that the fragile balance between the United States and Iran may be entering a more dangerous phase. Officially, Washington says its deployments are defensive, designed to protect shipping lanes, reassure allies, and maintain stability. But in geopolitics, military movement is rarely viewed as neutral. When an American carrier group moves closer to Iranian waters, every radar station, every command center, and every political office in the region begins calculating what comes next. For Iran, the arrival of a U.S. carrier is never just another military exercise. It represents air power, missile capability, intelligence dominance, and the ability to launch rapid operations with little warning. A modern carrier strike group can project force across hundreds of miles, monitor sea lanes, support allies, and strike targets if ordered. That is why Tehran reacts quickly whenever such deployments occur. Even if no shots are fired, the symbolism alone sends a message: America is present, armed, and ready. Iran's first response has not necessarily been direct confrontation, but signaling. Statements from officials, naval patrol activity, and warnings about sovereignty are often the first layer of Tehran's strategy. Iran understands that perception matters as much as capability. By responding immediately, it tells domestic audiences that it is alert and unafraid. It also tells Washington that any move in the Gulf will be watched, measured, and answered in some form. This cycle of action and reaction has defined U.S.-Iran relations for years. The Strait of Hormuz remains the most sensitive point in this entire equation. A narrow waterway through which a large share of global energy exports must pass, Hormuz is both an economic artery and a military choke point. If tensions rise there, the consequences extend far beyond the Middle East. Oil prices can jump within hours. Insurance costs for shipping can rise overnight. Markets from Europe to Asia begin reacting instantly. That is why every deployment in or near the Gulf is closely followed by traders as much as generals. From Washington's perspective, moving a carrier group toward the Gulf can serve multiple purposes at once. It can reassure Gulf allies who fear escalation. It can deter Iranian attacks on shipping or regional partners. It can provide rapid response capability if a crisis suddenly erupts. And it can send a political signal that the United States remains committed to protecting its interests despite global distractions elsewhere. In one move, military power becomes diplomacy. But Tehran sees the same move through a completely different lens. Iranian planners may interpret additional U.S. naval presence as pressure, coercion, or preparation for future operations. That does not mean war is imminent, but it does mean alert levels can rise. Missile forces may be placed on readiness. Coastal defense systems may be repositioned. Naval units may become more active. Proxy networks across the region may receive instructions to prepare. Even without open conflict, the battlefield can quietly activate. One reason this matters so much is history. The Gulf has seen tanker wars, seizures of vessels, drone incidents, sanctions pressure, and close encounters between naval forces. Both sides know how quickly misunderstandings can spiral. A fast patrol boat moving too close. A radar lock interpreted as hostile. A warning shot misread. In crowded waters with armed forces operating nearby, even a small mistake can create an international crisis in minutes. The American carrier itself is more than a ship. It is a floating air base, a command center, and a symbol of reach. With escorts, aircraft, missile defenses, and surveillance assets, it represents layered power. For US allies, that can be reassuring. For rivals, it can be provocative. That dual reality is why carriers are so politically powerful. They can calm one side while alarming another at the same time. Iran, however, has spent years preparing for exactly this kind of pressure. Rather than match the United States ship for ship, Tehran built an asymmetric strategy. Fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, mines, drones, cyber capabilities, and dispersed launch systems are designed to complicate any superior navy operating close to Iranian shores. The goal is not to defeat America conventionally. The goal is to raise costs, create uncertainty, and make every move risky. That is why analysts often say the real battle in the Gulf is psychological. America demonstrates overwhelming power. Iran demonstrates that power can be challenged. Washington wants freedom of navigation. Tehran wants leverage through geography. Neither side may seek full-scale war, yet both need to appear strong. This creates a dangerous paradox where restraint can look like weakness, and caution can be misread as hesitation. Regional allies are watching closely. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and others depend on secure sea routes and predictable energy markets. They welcome deterrence but fear uncontrolled escalation. A stronger US presence can feel stabilizing if it prevents attacks, yet destabilizing if it invites retaliation. For many governments in the region, the ideal outcome is pressure without war, deterrence without explosion. Achieving that balance is extremely difficult. Israel is also paying attention. Any major US-Iran tension affects the wider regional equation involving Hezbollah, Syria, Iraq, and maritime trade. If Washington becomes heavily focused on the Gulf, other actors may test boundaries elsewhere. If Tehran feels cornered, it could rely more heavily on allied groups outside Iran's borders. That means events at sea can influence security calculations far inland. Another major factor is domestic politics in both countries. In the United States, administrations often need to appear firm when challenged abroad, especially during periods of political pressure at home. In Iran, leaders cannot appear passive under visible American pressure without risking criticism internally. That means both governments face incentives to respond strongly even when neither wants war. Politics can narrow diplomatic space. So what happens next? Several scenarios are possible. The first is controlled signaling. The carrier remains in the region, Iran issues warnings, both sides posture, and tensions gradually cool. This is common and often intentional. The second scenario is sustained pressure, more sanctions, more patrols, more cyber activity, and rising incidents without open war. The third scenario is accidental escalation triggered by a miscalculation no one originally wanted. That is the scenario markets and militaries fear most. Military planners on both sides understand that wars do not always begin with grand decisions. Sometimes they begin with fatigue, confusion, or overconfidence. A pilot misreads instructions. A captain reacts too quickly. A local commander pushes too far. Once casualties occur, political leaders face immediate pressure to retaliate. In that sense, the most dangerous moments are not always the loudest headlines, but the quiet hours when everyone assumes control still exists. There is also the economic dimension. If Hormuz is threatened, even temporarily, global energy markets react sharply. Higher oil prices can increase inflation worldwide, hurt consumers, and pressure governments already dealing with economic strain. This gives the Gulf strategic weight far beyond its geography. A narrow stretch of water can influence elections, interest rates, and industrial output thousands of miles away. For Iran, that economic leverage is part of the equation. Tehran knows it cannot match US conventional power, but it can influence costs. Even the perception of risk in Hormuz can move prices and attract global attention. For Washington, protecting the waterway is therefore not only military policy but economic policy. The stakes are global, not local. Diplomacy remains possible, even in tense moments. Back-channel talks, third-party mediation, and quiet military communication channels often operate behind the scenes when public rhetoric sounds harsh. Oman, Qatar, European states, and others have historically played roles in reducing misunderstandings. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones never announced publicly. Still, uncertainty is the defining word tonight. A U.S. carrier moving toward the Gulf may be routine force management, strategic messaging, or preparation for contingencies. Iran's response may be symbolic, defensive, or part of a broader regional plan. The truth is often a mix of all three. In modern geopolitics, moves are layered, messages are coded, and reactions are rarely simple. What is clear is that the Gulf remains one of the world's most combustible arenas. Too much military power operates in too little space, under too much political pressure, with too much economic importance attached to every movement. That combination ensures that even routine deployments can become headline events. Tonight, the world is watching not because war has begun, but because everyone understands how quickly a tense peace can unravel. America wants deterrence. Iran wants respect and leverage. Allies want stability. Markets want calm. But history shows that when too many actors want different outcomes in the same narrow corridor, tension becomes the default setting. So as the carrier moves and Iran responds, the real story is larger than ships or statements. It is about whether rivals can manage confrontation without crossing the line into conflict. It is about whether strength can be shown without triggering escalation. And it is about whether one of the most important waterways on Earth can remain open while two adversaries continue testing each other in full view of the world.